And until next time, no nat ones. I didn't turn on my Enjoy phone audio. Howdy. My name is Nonat, and tell me, how often does this happen to you? Alright, so you all begin your journey from this city to that city. It should take about 3 days.
Well, does anything happen on the way there?
How about you all set up watch and find out?
I didn't prepare anything for the travel to the city.
Very well, I'll take first watch.
Okay. First day, nothing happens. Second day, nothing happens. Third, roll me a perception check. No, nothing happens. Okay, you're there. In my games, this happens way more often than I'd like to admit. I planned some super cool and interesting encounter at the destination, but I don't think of anything interesting to happen along the way. Sometimes I'll throw in a couple of enemies to have a quick fight during the journey, just so it feels like something happened, but it usually feels kind of hollow. In reality, the journey should be just as interesting as the destination. Now, this won't always be the case, but no matter what road you're taking, there's always animals, bandits, or even the occasional trap. As a GM, when it comes to traveling, I love to be just as surprised as my players when something unexpected happens. Something that not even the Dungeon Master was aware of popping up during a random, mundane trip from point A to point B. But today I'll be introducing you to a not often talked about solution for exactly this. This solution is easy, effective, and has been strangely omitted from both D&D and Pathfinder's core rulebooks. The Random Encounter Table. Now this does exist in the D&D 5e Dungeon Master's Guide, but only in a very hollow shell of what it once was. The DMG for 5e basically just tells you how to make a random encounter table and gives you one example. Lucky for all of us, one book from one specific system nailed the encounter tables so well, and it's formatted so perfectly that you can use those tables for any system ever. This shining example of the random encounter table is from the Rules Cyclopedia in 1991. I won't be diving deep into this book in this video, but definitely check it out. It's a phenomenal collection of the D&D Black Box set from the 70s and 80s. This is an edition of D&D that released alongside Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Some of its rulings for different things are different from AD&D, and I really adore this rule set. What we're looking at today are the gorgeously organized random encounter tables from pages 92 to 98 in the Rules Cyclopedia. They're simple, easy to use, and so effective. It includes tables to tell you the likelihood of the encounter, the disposition of the creatures within the encounter, what type of creatures are in the encounter, and even which specific creature of that type is in the encounter. Step by step, it goes like this. The party is walking through a forest. First, we roll a d6 to determine if an encounter even happens. According to the table, in a forest, a 1 or a 2 on a 6-sided die triggers a random encounter. After that, we roll a d12 to determine the creature's disposition toward the party. If, for example, we were to roll a 9, the creature's disposition is cautious and will swiftly change depending on how the encounter begins. After determining the disposition, we'll check the Wilderness Encounter table and look at the Woods section. We roll a d8, and let's say we roll a 6 and get Animal. Well, we head down to the Animal subtable, find the Woods section, and roll one final d12 to determine exactly what is in the encounter. Let's say we roll a 3 and bam, the party is encountering a cautious panther in the middle of the woods. How the encounter goes is entirely determined on what they do next. Will they simply attack the panther on sight? Will they be kind and try to help it? Will they just let it run off and track it to see where it goes? Or will they inevitably tame it and make it a party companion? The options are honestly endless, and as a GM, here's where you can start to get very creative with things. With the base totally set up, start improvising. Why is the panther there? Where did it come from? Where is it going? What condition is it in? Is it injured? As the scene continues to unfold, you get to do anything you want with it. My favorite part of these random encounter tables is that you never know what's going to happen next, even the GM. Now, this may frighten some GMs and make them uncomfortable. They may not feel comfortable with designing encounters on the spot, even with the basic setup for them. This is all totally fine, but this is excellent training for your improvisation as a GM. I will always say that a GM's ability to BS and improv on the spot is such a useful tool to have in the toolkit because players will inevitably go off and do something completely random. So this can help you deal with that in the future even when not using random encounter tables. In my D&D basic campaign a few years back, the party was traveling across some grassland, so I rolled and there's a random encounter. I rolled and got humans and merchant. Well, the party was already on their way to a dwarven city, so I decided, well, let's make it a dwarf merchant. This merchant named Bandathar was instantly loved by the party and became a reoccurring character. They escorted him to the dwarven city, he thanked them, gave them some gold, and he popped back up with some side quests and information from time to time throughout the rest of the campaign. This throwaway random encounter suddenly became a firm staple of the campaign. We can hardly talk about that campaign without mentioning Bandathar, or his dad Bandathar, and his dad Bandathar. Similarly, in the same campaign, they were walking through a forest, and I happened to roll a dragon random encounter. A white dragon, to be specific. Now, they were level 4 at this point, so obviously, I couldn't just throw a white dragon at them, so I got creative. I had them all roll perception checks, and only one of them succeeded, but he could see through a small break in the forest canopy, he saw what looked like a white dragon just fly overhead. And that was it. That was the entire encounter, was this cool moment of stopping, seeing what they think might be a dragon, talking about it, and moving on. And then, guess what? Later in the campaign, I hadn't planned for this, that white dragon became an incredibly important plot point as the gnolls on the ridge that were assaulting the nearby villages were worshipping that dragon as a god. That was never my original intent, but after rolling the dragon, doing some research, and integrating it into my story, it made my story that much deeper. Random encounter tables definitely aren't for everyone, but if you've never used them, I highly encourage you to give them a shot. Even if you're not at a game, just roll up some random encounters using these tables. You will be amazed at some of the things you never would have thought of. I know the creatures in these lists don't perfectly line up with the creatures in modern bestiaries and monster manuals, but you can find a substitution pretty easily. Or just stop rolling after getting the monster type and pick out the specific monster on your own. Also, I never mentioned them, but there are even more tables specifically for dungeons and cities. The city encounter table is massive depending on district, and you roll a d20 instead of a d12. And the dungeon tables, holy cow, they're separate tables depending on party level and the difficulty of the dungeon. They did so much great stuff with these tables. And finally, just for fun here at the end, let's make a live random encounter for you as an example. I'm just going to quickly do this. I'm actually going to stop editing right here. I have the PDF up in front of me so you can see exactly how it goes. So we'll assume they're traveling, let's say they're sailing in the ocean. They're on their boat in the ocean, and we will assume we rolled a random encounter on the D6. Well, first off, we need to roll our D12 to determine the disposition of the creatures. I rolled a 4, so the creature is aggressive. They're not completely hostile, but they will attack pretty easily without much provoking. So we will move down to Ocean, which is right there. We'll grab our D8, roll our D8, and we will be encountering, number 5, a swimmer, which is most of what's on there, because, you know, it's the ocean. So we scroll down, we find the swimmer category, which is right there, roll our D12 for the ocean, and in the ocean on a 10, they are encountering a water termite. Oh, that sounds cool. So yeah, a pretty simple thing. Maybe their boat, they're just sailing through and the water gets weirdly shallow and it feels like the boat hits the water's bottom, but there's no way they're that low. But eating away at the ship's hull at the bottom is just a swarm of water termites trying to eat away at the boat, so the players have to run down, pry these termites off, kill them before they sink their ship, and boom, that little boat ride from point A to point B suddenly has a life or death situation inside of it that I would have never thought of on my own. I love these tables, guys. They're fantastic. Seriously, give them a once-over if you haven't already. Do you plan on using these random encounter tables? Have you used them in the past? Tell me in the comments below. I want to hear some crazy stories that nobody saw coming. I want to give a shout out to my patrons for supporting me and supporting the channel, and a huge shout out to my anonymous donor who donated me 3 books on fantasy grounds for Pathfinder 2e. Thank you so much. Your donation is incredibly generous, and I thank you for it. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and until next time, no nat ones.